Hello, everyone, and welcome again to today's program on the menu, Nutrition and Parkinson's. As I mentioned a moment ago, my name is Annie Long, and I am the Associate Director of Community Programs at the Parkinson's Foundation. The Parkinson's Foundation is pleased to be presenting this program in partnership with Northwell Health. A few housekeeping items before we get started. Today's program is a webinar. Attendees will be muted and off camera during today's presentation to help reduce background noise and echo. There will be a short introduction before today's presentation. And after the presentation, we'll take some questions from our audience for a moderated Q&A session. Questions can be submitted today by clicking on the Q&A icon in the black banner on the bottom of your viewing page. We'll do our best to address as many questions as we can. If you have any technical challenges during today's meeting, please let us know via the Q&A box and we'll respond as quickly as possible. For optimal viewing of our speaker today, please choose Speaker View at the top right-hand corner of your viewing page. Today's program, as I mentioned, will be recorded, and a link to that recording will be sent out. And again, we want to let everybody know that this is being broadcast live via Facebook. So a special shout out to those joining us on Facebook. So a little bit about the Parkinson's Foundation. The Parkinson's Foundation makes life better for people with Parkinson's by improving care and advancing research toward a cure. We're the nation's leading community for people with Parkinson's disease, the people who love them, and all those who are working to end the disease. Every day and in everything we do, we're working to make life better for people with Parkinson's. To achieve our mission, we pursue three goals. First, improve care for everyone with Parkinson's. Second, advance research toward a cure. And lastly, empower and educate our global community. We provide many free resources, including our website, parkinson.org, where you'll find information about the Foundation's research, current initiatives, and upcoming events. Our website also provides information about living with Parkinson's disease, webinars, podcasts, and print resources for download. In addition, you can order a hospital safety kit called Aware and Care, our newly diagnosed toolkit, and any of our educational resources via our website. Finally, our toll-free helpline at 1-800-4PD-INFO is available to answer your questions or help with accessing our educational resources. So at this time, I want to again acknowledge our partner, Northwell Health. Without their support and collaboration, today's program would not have been possible. We're excited to work with them to bring the greater New York PD community valuable Parkinson's education programs. So without further delay, it's my pleasure to introduce today's first speaker and program moderator, Dr. Alessandro Di Rocco. Dr. Di Rocco is a world-renowned leader in the field of Parkinson's and movement disorders. He has been the principal and co-investigator of numerous research studies, including NIH, and major national and international foundation-sponsored studies, and has been awarded nearly 24 grants to support his research efforts. He has authored over 90 articles, 12 books and book chapters, over 125 abstracts and other publications. Dr. Di Rocco serves on many advisory boards and committees, including the Parkinson's Foundation Board of Directors. Dr. Di Rocco will be joined today by another Northwell Health expert, Dr. Amanda Persaud. Dr. Di Rocco, I will now turn it over to you.
Thank you very much. And I think this is it's an important meeting. It's an important discussion that we will be having today. And it's a discussion that comes frequently in the dialogue we have in the clinics, or just as part of also of our pursuit of the understanding of the roots and the causes of Parkinson. So diet and nutrition, we're really a lot of what we eat and a lot of what defines, our sort of well-being is in many ways channeled through diet and nutrition. And I think today's program will address some of the key questions that are related to this. One is, what is the role of nutrition in good and bad in preventing Parkinson, or maybe promoting the onset of Parkinson? Oftentimes I hear the question, is there something that was in the diet is because I was eating too much sugar, too little sugar, too many of this? that cause Parkinson, or maybe trigger something in my body that eventually led to Parkinson. And this is an important question, and you'll see in today's presentation what we know, what we are learning about this. Another aspect of this is, once diagnosis of Parkinson is established, what is the best nutrition? What is it that I should eat or avoid or stay away or be careful about in the nutrition? What will make my symptoms better? Or is there anything that can make my symptom better? And what about constipation? What about some of the other phenomena that accompany Parkinson? How is that affected by my diet and nutrition? And the third and really important aspect of that is the effect of the interactions between food and diet and medication. Are certain foods sort of better fit with certain medications we use with Parkinson's disease, or certain foods sort of interact or antagonize some of the benefit of the Parkinson medications? So this will be the focus of the discussion, and there is a lot, and the field is really growing in our understanding. And Dr. Persaud will be leading the discussion. Was a wonderful colleague. She's an assistant professor of neurology at the Zucker School of Medicine at Northwell Health. And she's also very active. She's the movement disorder specialist leading our inpatient rehabilitation program, which is a comprehensive program addressing the different needs that people with Parkinson have. So very attuned into the sort of the life experiential dimension of Parkinson. So it's my pleasure to introduce Dr. Amanda Persaud and have her expertise in leading the discussion in this. Dr. Persaud, it's a pleasure to have you here.
Thanks, Dr. Di Rocco, and thanks to the Parkinson's Foundation for having me. This is a great opportunity. I'm just going to share my screen quickly. So this is a great opportunity that the Parkinson's Foundation has given us, because this is a very important topic that often in the office we may not have enough time to go into all the details, because there are a lot of things that we discuss during those office visits. So I'd like to thank the Parkinson's Foundation for allowing us to talk about this very important topic, and one that affects literally our day-to-day, if not every 4 hours of our lives. And so, like Dr. Di Rocco said, this is a growing field, and I actually have a keen interest in this since I was in college, when the concept of the gut-brain axis was starting to develop. So I've had a long interest in this area of movement disorders, but also in medicine. So it was kind of natural for me to agree to do this talk today. And so we'll go into more detail because there is a very big connection between the gut and the brain. So let's get started. So just a little bit of background. So Parkinson's disease is actually the second most common neurodegenerative disease worldwide, with Alzheimer's being first. And it affects a good portion of the population, about 1% of the population over the age of 60. So that's quite a few people when you think about it worldwide. As many of you know, many of the cardinal features are bradykinesia, or what we call the slowness in the movement, stiffness or rigidity, balance trouble, walking trouble, and of course, tremor. When it comes to the causes of Parkinson's, well, that can be a whole lecture on its own, but it is more multifactorial than we would like to believe, and there are a lot of factors that go into that. And you can see on the image on the right that there are a lot of risk factors, And then there are a lot of what we call inverse risk factors, which is how this lecture came about. So the risk factors, some of them that we know of are very environmental as well, including pesticides. Dairy products have been implicated, even patients with melanoma or patients who have had traumatic brain injury. So the classic example, or the most popular example is Muhammad Ali, who had multiple brain injuries and developed Parkinson's later on. But don't forget that there's a genetic contribution as well. And so when we discuss Parkinson's, we also discuss that, every patient is their own case, or their own example of Parkinson's. And comparing yourself to other patients is sometimes difficult because of these genetic factors. But on the flip side, we have inverse risk factors, which mean that these are associations that have been made that actually decrease the risk of developing Parkinson's. And oddly enough, smoking was one of them. That doesn't mean that we are encouraging you to smoke, because there are a lot of other health problems that can come about from that. But we believe it's the nicotine in the cigarettes that potentially have been correlated with decreasing the risk of Parkinson's, along with caffeine. Urate or uric acid, which is often the problem in gout, but seems to be beneficial when it comes to Parkinson's. Of course, our favorite is physical activity, and anti-inflammatory medications like ibuprofen or even calcium channel blockers. But these are just some of the risk factors that have been acknowledged in the research so far. There are many other theories that are being developed now, but nutrition has become incredibly popular as we've continued our research in Parkinson's. And part of the problem is this sort of little image right here. So we know that there's a chemical problem in Parkinson's disease. We know that the dopamine level in the brain is low. Really, we think that it starts with this abnormal protein called alpha-synuclein that causes a group of abnormal proteins. When this group is formed, it can lead to degeneration, meaning cell death, but it can also lead to a different type of metabolism for the cells themselves that put the cell under stress and create what we call reactive oxygen species. And in turn, in essence, Parkinson's has been viewed now as a neuroinflammatory disease because of the end product here. So these reactive oxygen species, nutrition has really become a main focus of it, because things like antioxidants and vitamins they're very important in these processes and help to decrease this, what we call oxidative stress, and these toxins that are created essentially. So it is a chemical problem, but the chemical problem just doesn't stop at a decrease in dopamine. It is a little bit more complex than that. And so that's what the research has focused a lot on. How can we alter these pathways to prevent this neuroinflammation and kind of stop this cycle, or at least halt it? So here we have just some ideas as to how nutrition specifically is related to Parkinson's disease. And we'll go through majority of these topics, if not all, including the effect of dairy products, alcohol, the Mediterranean style diet, coffee and tea, but of course also the microbiota, which is the composition of bacteria that live in our gut. And we know there's a lot of bacteria that live there, but we have also realized that some are better than others and some we don't want around at all. So the gut-brain axis, one of my favorite topics actually, because the brain influences the gut, and in turn, the gut influences the brain, which makes nutrition naturally a very important part of Parkinson's disease. And many people, actually there's been evidence that maybe the Parkinson's actually starts in the gut. And I'm sure many of you know that the constipation symptom can happen many years before any motor symptoms happen, before the tremor, before the trouble walking, there's constipation. And so the thought is that not only the bacteria, but the abnormal protein that's abnormal in the brain in Parkinson's, the alpha-synuclein, is also present in the gut before we see any of the physical symptoms. And this connection here with the vagus nerve is how the information is relayed back and forth between the brain and the gut. And so this is kind of a complicated picture, but I will try to simplify it. So the abnormal proteins from the brain communicate with the intestine or the gut. But the gut itself also produces dopamine, which is what's low in Parkinson's. And when there's a low production of dopamine, then there is some inflammatory processes that take place, making the wall of the intestine unstable. And there's actually been studies done where biopsies were taken from the gut of patients with Parkinson's, and the same protein that's abnormal in the brain was found in the intestines as well. So that is more supportive of the fact that there is a connection between the gut and the brain, connected by the vagus nerve or cranial nerve 10. And so the thought behind the gut-brain axis is that the gut may influence the changes in the brain and vice versa. It can also affect things like behavior. We know that patients who are constipated can have a lot of depression and anxiety associated with it as well. And that the dopamine itself, when it's low, usually it helps to protect the intestine, as I mentioned in the previous slide, but also helps the actual movement of the intestines when it comes to constipation. So decreased dopamine often leads to increase in constipation. So without the dopamine, the wall of the gut becomes damaged. And when the wall of the gut is damaged, it leaves a large opening for toxins to enter. And where do we get these toxins? Well, we can get it from our hamburgers and our donuts. And basically any processed food seems to deteriorate the integrity of the intestinal wall, allowing for more food particles and toxins to enter the bloodstream. Because of the bacteria that are present in these processed foods that should not technically be there. And so or are not necessarily beneficial or protective for us. And that creates an inflammatory response when we eat these types of foods consistently. And, other things that parts to this are, yes, the processed foods, the sugar substitutes. There's been a lot of talk about non-organic vegetables, and likely that's related to the pesticides that are used in growing those vegetables. Unfiltered water has been implicated in affecting the wall of the intestine as well. And the toxins also, they dissolve well in fat. And as we know, processed foods have a lot of fat in them. And that can potentially lead to the increased risk of Parkinson's disease. So what's the big idea? So the brain talks to the gut and the gut talks to the brain. And when we eat certain foods, we can sometimes disrupt this connection. We cause increased gut permeability, which is the integrity of the intestinal wall becomes weak and toxins enter. Not only that, we get what we call gut dysbiosis, where the bacteria that we would like to be there get challenged by these bacteria that are introduced through the foods and the pesticides, etc. And that leads to the inflammatory response, which is ultimately what we are trying to avoid when it comes to Parkinson's disease, because it can release chemicals that are harmful and further lead to our reactive oxygen species, for example. So what do we know? So I will start this section off by saying that there has been a lot of research on nutrition and Parkinson's, but it has been very inconsistent. We have a lot of studies that say yes. We have a lot of studies that say, well, if you eat this, this chemical improves and the anti-inflammatory response improves, etc. But it doesn't always quite correlate necessarily to the physical function that we're trying to gain in Parkinson's disease. So there have been some promising studies that were done, but not necessarily giving us that clinical benefit, that improvement in the tremor, in the walking necessarily. So there's been a little bit of controversy in the research. But I'm going to go through a few of the studies that have made a big impact and that we support the conclusions that they've made over the years. So the first category of foods is the vitamins and flavonoids. So the vitamins and flavonoids, they are considered antioxidants. And when they are low, they lead to neuroinflammation and oxidative stress. So there was a study done by Gao and colleagues, and they found that these flavonoids, which are often found in teas, coffee, mostly in teas, that they cross what we call the blood-brain barrier, which is the entryway into the brain. And when they cross the blood-brain barrier, they actually decrease inflammation and influence survival of the dopamine neurons. So that sounds like great evidence to me. And so teas have a high concentration of flavonoids, actually. Certain spices can also contribute, and we'll go into this in a little bit more detail later. Turmeric is actually a very popular one because it has been shown to be anti-inflammatory and not only affect Parkinson's disease, but any sort of inflammatory disease such as celiac disease. It has been played a big role, even arthritis with its anti-inflammatory response. So turmeric has been made very popular because of its antioxidant capabilities. And we'll talk a little bit more about probiotics as well. So this is a very popular question. There's been a few studies on coenzyme Q10, and I often get asked, should I be taking a coenzyme Q10? Well, what the studies tell us is that one, the coenzyme Q10 is an antioxidant, and that patients with Parkinson's tend to be deficient in it. And we know that it's safe and well tolerated. And some of the studies, like in 2002, there was a reduced motor symptoms when patients took coenzyme Q10. However, it was not exactly they weren't exactly to replicate that later on. So while we know it's an antioxidant, sometimes the benefits, for example, with in Storch's group here, there were no appreciable benefits in their group after 3 months. And they used various doses and high dose, low dose, etc. in all of these studies. And so the evidence is conflicting, but we know it's an antioxidant. So we know it's not harmful. And it's targeting the chemical process that we think is the problem in Parkinson's disease. And in some of the studies, it shows moderate beneficial effects, and in some, no significant clinical benefits. Now, keep in mind that we also have to consider that it's not solely the CoQ10 that's working, it's also genetics and other food factors and physical activity and all the lifestyle modifications that can influence this. So it's certainly not a one-to-one, but we know that it has an antioxidant effect. Similarly, we get questions about N-acetylcysteine as well, which we also know is an antioxidant, and it penetrates the brain pretty well. And it has shown in some studies that it can also increase the dopamine transport in the brain as well. But again, even though we see these findings chemically, we don't really have great evidence for what they do physically. but we can see that there is a chemical benefit. Omega-3 has also been looked at, and we know that that reduces inflammation. Again, these studies can be conflicting, and the chemical benefit doesn't necessarily always 100% correlate with the physical benefit, but we know that it is beneficial in the chemical side of things. Again, same with turmeric. Polyunsaturated fatty acids. So these are the good fatty acids, as opposed to the saturated fatty acids that are found in processed foods. So things like walnuts, sunflower seeds, flax seeds, various oils like olive oil, coconut oil, corn oil. They are high in polyunsaturated fatty acids, as well as salmon, trout, tuna, all of the, even mackerel, all of these types of fishes are also high in polyunsaturated fatty acids, which have been associated with a decrease in risk and progression of Parkinson's disease. So the type of fats that are in, so not all fats are bad. I'll start with that. It depends on the type of fats, and the polyunsaturated fatty acids are the way to go, it seems. Vitamin E. So another one of the, so getting into the vitamins now, vitamin E is a very well-known antioxidant in the brain. We can find it in a variety of foods, and you'll see a lot of crossover between the different types of foods that are recommended and what they can provide, which will lead us into, you know, what is it that we recommend in terms of diet in Parkinson's. But vitamin E is also found in a lot of oils, in whole grains, even in eggs. You find it in spinach, almonds, etc. And we know that it has an antioxidant effect. But again, the studies are not necessarily, even though we know that it helps with the inflammatory response, which we believe is very important, there's still a lot of research that we need to do to show, well, can this also affect our physical activity? So there was a study done actually by Dr. Fawn, where they looked at vitamin C and vitamin E. And the reason they looked at vitamin C is because there has been some literature that says that vitamin C actually helps to increase the absorption of levodopa. But vitamin C is also very important in the inflammatory response, and it is also very important as an antioxidant. So it plays multiple roles. And they found that those who received the vitamin C plus vitamin E, that they were able to delay the time that they started levodopa. And then there have been some other studies that show that there is a reduced Parkinson's risk when patients take high vitamin E or vitamin E rich foods as well. But then there have also been studies that say it did not show any benefits in improving the symptoms or the progression. So again, the evidence is conflicting. Now, keep in mind that when we're doing different types of research, that the way that they perform the research, the doses, the inclusion criteria, the subjects that they gather, all of these can play a factor as to why we're getting such conflicting evidence as well. Because remember that, don't forget about the genetics. This was an interesting study, actually, the DataTop study, and we looked at actually selegiline, which many patients are on, versus vitamin E. And this study showed that selegiline did delay the time to disability when it came to Parkinson's, but that the vitamin E did not necessarily do the same thing. So again, another sort of contradicting study, but one that's important because we got good information about selegiline, but there still needs to be more research done in this area to really determine in a controlled way what's beneficial. The B vitamins. Now, the B vitamins are incredibly important as well, especially folate, which is B9, B6, and B12. And this little diagram right here is precisely why. So when you eat dietary protein, you you produce something called methionine. And when you do that, methionine needs to be broken down into glutathione, which is very antioxidant in the brain and very important. But in order to get from here to down here to glutathione, you need a lot of what we call cofactors. And that's where the B vitamins come into play. B12, B9, B6, they play a big role. And this cycle cannot function and produce the glutathione without these cofactors. And so if they're not present, we get an accumulation of this compound called homocysteine, which is actually inflammatory and can affect the brain at very high doses or high levels in a negative way. And so that's what we're trying to avoid. And we need these vitamins in order to avoid the accumulation of the homocysteine. However, when we gave patients a bunch of B vitamins, B6, B12, B9, the supplementation didn't necessarily show a significant clinical effect, meaning that their physical abilities weren't, even though their homocysteine levels were low, were not necessarily benefiting their walking or their stiffness or their overall motor function. But we know that we need them. And we know that without them, patients feel worse as well. So, but the research is still in progress, and there's a lot more that we need to know. But there are a lot of foods that contain these B vitamins as well. Oats, spinach, eggs and dairy, fish, etc. And so you'll see a lot of these foods repeat in terms of what their nutritional contribution is. Vitamin C, as I mentioned before, it is an antioxidant, and it's been shown to actually improve the absorption of levodopa in the gut, and so it can be a very important factor when we talk about what affects levodopa, the medication itself. Probiotics. So probiotics are also kind of newer on the scene, but have also been around for a long time when you look back into foods from different cultures. It's been around a long time, but now we kind of labeled it. So in a 12-week study actually from Iran, which was actually a double-blind placebo-controlled study, which is our favorite kind, there were about 60 patients with PD aged from 50 to 90. And what we found out from this study was, and they were given probiotics, and what we found from this study was that there were no side effects, which is very important, but that the probiotics also improve their Parkinson's motor score, the MDS-UPDRS score, and also decrease a C-reactive protein, which is an indicator of inflammation in the body, and also improve their insulin levels. So there was a lot of benefit found with the probiotics. It helps to keep the good bacteria around. And we know that when the good bacteria is around, we can better process any toxins and keep the integrity of the intestine. So everything is connected. And so when we have all the bad bacteria around, for example, when we eat too many processed foods, too many sugars, etc., then we compromise the integrity of the intestine, and then in turn we affect the brain through the gut-brain axis. So the probiotic effect has actually been replicated a few times, and the benefits of the probiotics, excuse me, have certainly proven to be beneficial without any harmful side effects. So dairy products. So dairy products are a very popular topic because they contain a lot of protein. So it was found that the risk of developing Parkinson's disease was increased among those who drank a lot of milk and had a lot of dairy consumption. The thought behind that was that it lowers urate, excuse me, which is an important anti-inflammatory molecule And so if milk decreases that, then we're more inflammatory than we should be. Excuse me. But the studies weren't consistent. And the thought behind that is that because there is also the influence of pesticides potentially that are influencing why patients who take a lot of dairy or who ingest a lot of dairy have a higher risk of Parkinson's disease in general. There are a lot of protein interactions, and protein is a popular topic because there is evidence that protein can interfere with the absorption of levodopa. And so often we recommend that we separate protein from the levodopa dose by about 30 to 45 minutes, either before or after, because of this interaction. They essentially enter the gut or absorb the levodopa, and the protein are competing for absorption. And that's been shown in multiple studies. However, we don't have the evidence to say never take dairy or never eat dairy products. We still have to keep in mind that there is an overall health goal, and that dairy products are still a part of a balanced diet. And we'll get into a little bit more detail as to how we can kind of counter the protein interactions potentially with levodopa when it comes to the medication absorption. Coffee is one of our favorites. Caffeine consumption actually has been shown in multiple studies to reduce the risk of Parkinson's disease. And the way that we believe that that happens is because it stimulates a receptor called the adenosine receptor. It antagonizes it. And it also has been found to increase the levodopa absorption. Now, we think that that might be related to the fact that caffeine or coffee can increase the intestinal motility. So it can help with your bowel movements, essentially. And if your bowels are moving well, then the levodopa is better absorbed. And in a study with about 244 patients over 5.3 years, there was a risk that was lower in tea drinkers, but any sort of caffeinated coffee, patients tend to live longer in this study, and they had a slower disease progression and a slower cognitive decline when compared to those who had never consumed coffee. So coffee certainly has shown multiple times to be beneficial in Parkinson's disease, in the constipation symptom, in the overall motor symptoms as well. And we know that fatigue is a big problem in patients with Parkinson's, and so that added alertness from coffee is also beneficial in that regard as well. But it has been shown to increase the levodopa absorption, so our medications technically work better as well. Fiber. So fiber has been studied as well at various doses. And we know from animal models and from that, regular bowel movements prevent toxins from forming. And when we prevent the toxins from forming, we decrease the chance of them getting reabsorbed and in affecting the integrity of the intestine and getting those toxins from the gut to the brain. So what fiber does is it actually binds these toxins and helps to keep the gut intact so that it's not so easy for these toxins to get through and lead back to the brain. And so the fiber actually helps to keep the gut healthy and in turn keep the brain healthy. And without it, sometimes especially when we're eating highly processed foods, there can be overgrowth of the bacteria that we don't want. So fiber is a way to help prevent that. And in fact, because of the way that it works to bind the toxins and aid with the bowel movements, it can also increase levodopa absorption. So it's another one of those foods that can help the medication work better. Other foods that have a little bit of evidence, but not a whole lot, are foods like whey protein. That has been shown in a couple of studies to improve motor function, reduce inflammation, and basically put you in a detoxification sort of state. And then we also get a lot of questions about specific diets, which I'll go into in more detail, but the ketogenic and the gluten-free diets have been proposed because they reduce toxicity from food intolerance, meaning that if your body is not responding well to certain foods, it's going to create an inflammatory response. And then our cycle starts again, where the gut wall is affected. And then the inflammatory response from the gut goes to the brain via the vagus nerve. So the gut-brain axis shows up multiple times when we're talking about nutrition and Parkinson's disease, or any neurodegenerative disease that is where inflammation is involved. And so the ketogenic diet and the gluten-free diet have shown benefit because they avoid this inflammatory response for foods that may not be very well tolerated by certain patients. Carbohydrates are another group of foods that have been looked at, and they can sometimes interfere with muscle protein, cause decreased muscle strength and function. But again, there hasn't been very strong evidence per se to say that patients should not have any carbs. Carbs are still considered part of a well-balanced diet, and so we have to take a lot of the evidence with a grain of salt, because the evidence is not necessarily there or strong enough for us to say no carbs. So carbs are still part of your well-balanced diet. So this is kind of a nice, complicated diagram that I'm going to try to break down for you to kind of summarize most of the things that we've talked about so far. So with the gut-brain axis, so this is a picture essentially of the gut. So here's the intestinal part, here's the blood, and then here's the brain. So we know that levodopa is absorbed through the gut, through these large nucleic acid transporters. So this is the protein transporter. We know that certain protein reduction, fiber, caffeine, vitamin C have shown to help to increase the levodopa, which is the medication that we tend to use in Parkinson's. And that this is then absorbed into the brain via a similar transporter. And then on the outside of the brain, we have folic acid, B12, B6, that are also playing an anti-inflammatory role and trying to reduce this homocysteine, which can lead to oxidative stress, and it can also lead to other medical problems as well, like neuropathy. That's why it's been postulated that it's an increase in homocysteine that leads to neuropathy and Parkinson's as well. And it can also lead to cardiovascular problems. But interestingly, there's a fine balance. So when we focus here, yes, there's foods that can potentially increase the levodopa availability, fiber, caffeine, vitamin C, but we have to take in mind that more is not always is better, because remember, we can also develop dyskinesias when the medication is working at its best. So in contrast, for patients who have dyskinesias from the levodopa, they are advised sometimes to increase their protein so that they can block some of the effect of the levodopa to try and reduce the dyskinesias. But that's also very variable. Everybody responds to that a little bit different, because you will find patients who are not that sensitive to protein when it comes to their levodopa working, and then there are patients that are very sensitive to protein. And again, that brings up, the genetic part of the discussion. So this is probably the most important part of the whole discussion. It's the Mediterranean diet. Now, this is the diet that is recommended in Parkinson's disease. And you'll see as I go through the next few slides that we've talked about a lot of these foods already, and they come up again and again. So you can think of this as what you need to eat most, okay? Daily servings of cereals, beans, nuts, seeds, vegetables, and fruits. Oils, olive oil, coconut oil, fish and seafood is a very big part. You'll see here that even in the Mediterranean diet, there are dairy products still there because it is still considered part of a well-balanced diet. And then we have sweets and red meat that are still in the diet, but sparingly, monthly or in small amounts. So why is this diet what's recommended? Well, it's been found that based on the foods that are involved in this diet, they're associated with neuroprotection, and they produce a lot of the vitamins and the flavonoids and the fiber and vitamin C and vitamin E that we talked about earlier. The diet has been shown to be anti-inflammatory, which we know we want in Parkinson's disease, and there are a lot of antioxidants that are embedded in these foods that we're eating in the Mediterranean diet, particularly the vitamins. And it has been shown to positively affect the gut-brain axis and promote the bacteria that we do want in the gut, the ones that keep the gut integrity intact. So what kind of things are on the Mediterranean diet? Well, there's a lot of vegetables, there's a lot of fruits, and I didn't mention before, but I will now. Berries contain a lot of flavonoids as well, just like tea does, and they are antioxidant as well. So those are high on the Mediterranean diet shopping list. Legumes, whole grains, nuts, flax seeds, wild fish, again, trout, mackerel, tuna, salmon. And it's not that you can't have any meat or meat protein, it's just that it's in smaller amounts than a typical American diet per se. So what is the evidence that we have for this diet? Well, there was a study done in 2018 called the MIND study, and it looked at the Mediterranean diet plus the DASH diet, which is the low salt diet that a lot of cardiac patients are on. And it was looking to see whether this diet affects neurodegeneration, which we know is the problem in Parkinson's disease and a lot of other neurologic conditions. So they looked at a pretty decent amount of patients, 706 subjects. And they started following them when they didn't have any Parkinsonism at all. And what they found was that there was a 13% reduction in the risk of developing Parkinson's disease or the progression of symptoms once they were diagnosed in these patients, which is a pretty big deal. It's up there with physical activity, but we know physical activity has a very big effect on progression. But so does this diet, it looks like, as well. And even more interesting and very relevant to why we are having this talk today is because just this year, there was the big Swedish cohort study that looked at the Mediterranean diet as well. But you have to take this study with a grain of salt because they look specifically at Swedish women. They looked at a lot of them, about 47,000 of them at various ages. And they enrolled them before the age of 50. And then at the age of 50, they started following them. And they were looking for an association between the Mediterranean style diet and a decreased risk of Parkinson's disease from the age of 65 onward, which is the general age when Parkinson's starts to present itself physically. And they showed that with the adherence to the Mediterranean style diet, there was a 29% lower risk for Parkinson's disease at age 65 or older. So that's much more. I mean, the last study was 13%, but this is 29%. So that's pretty significant. And this is for patients who were very consistent with this diet. There were some that weren't as consistent and they had their effect wasn't as robust, but for those who were highly consistent with this diet, 29% lower risk for Parkinson's disease at age 65 or older. And they continue to follow these patients, so which makes this a very big study in Parkinson's indeed, because after 10.9 years, only 101 women out of the 47,000 were diagnosed with Parkinson's disease. Now, again, take this with a grain of salt, no pun intended, that this is a very specific cohort of patients, Swedish women. They have potentially different genetics and different lifestyles, etc., that may also be contributing to this. But the reduction in risk is still significant, and it correlates with what we've seen before, for example, in that 2018 study that we just discussed. So this is just a graph from the Swedish study, showing that patients who had a low adherence to the Mediterranean diet had a sharper increase in their risk of developing Parkinson's disease, whereas those that had in this dashed line, those that had a medium or high adherence to the Mediterranean style diet had a it's a much more gradual increase in potentially the risk of Parkinson's disease, and it's delayed much later as well. So increasing levodopa absorption. So this is one of the most popular questions that we got when we were advertising this program. And basically the question is, how do we make the medications work better for us? Well, we talked about fiber and how fiber can play a role in increasing the absorption. We talked about vitamin C, and we talked about caffeine also playing a role in increasing the availability of the levodopa when we do take the medications. Well, what's been studied more specifically right now is protein and how protein affects the absorption of the levodopa. And so based on the studies, what was found was that if you redistribute your protein, because we know you need protein, we know the protein is part of a balanced diet, plus some of the foods that you eat for the benefit of the vitamins and the antioxidants often have protein in them. The eggs, the fish, the beans, the nuts, the seeds, they still have protein in them. So realistically, there is almost no way to avoid protein altogether. Plus, we also don't want to risk our patients losing too much weight as well. And sometimes weight gain can be a challenge, and protein helps with that. So what's been proposed and what's been shown to be pretty effective is what we call protein redistribution diets. So that doesn't mean no protein. It just means that we change the time when we take the protein in. And basically what it means is you limit your protein during the day, and it's more concentrated at dinner time at the end of the day when patients are not moving around as often and they're getting ready to kind of wind down to go to sleep. So the movement is not as important per se like it is during the day. And patients who did this, who redistributed their protein and concentrated it more so at dinner, had an improvement in their clinical symptoms during the daytime without having to compromise the amount of protein that they are required to take to be a generally healthy individual. So that is actually a technique that has been recommended, especially based on this recent article by Bolens and his colleagues in Advanced Nutrition, that protein redistribution diets have shown to be very beneficial. Now, again, I bring up the topic of dyskinesias, which I thought is a very important topic because many patients have a side effect of dyskinesias. And in some of the studies, they consider giving protein to help reduce the dyskinesias. And so that is also up for debate because we don't have great evidence for, well, how much protein or exactly what sort of ratio we should have with each meal, etc. So there's a lot of work still to be done. But I think that this is a good way to look at protein consumption, because it's not that you should not have any protein at all. And as we know, in Parkinson's, timing is key. And so, yes, if you want to have protein for lunch, sure. What we recommend is that you separate the protein from the levodopa by about 30 minutes or so, just to avoid this competitiveness of the protein and the levodopa to be absorbed in the intestine. So that is what we generally recommend, is 30 minutes either before or after. Some studies would say you wait 2 hours after you ingest the protein, but again, the evidence is not exact, and every patient also has a different response to protein. Some patients don't feel any effect with protein, and some are very sensitive to protein. So it's also still very individualized. And of course, the goal in Parkinson's is to create individual medicine. But for now, this is the evidence that we have to work with. And so in conclusion, while the studies are controversial, they all agree that a well-balanced, healthy diet, low in processed foods, is what's recommended. Diet is one part of the lifestyle modifications that lead to better control of Parkinsonian symptoms and progression from the chemical standpoint, and the gut-brain axis that we discussed. But also keep in mind, it's not the only thing. We still need to regularly exercise. We still need to sleep regularly. We still need to find ways to decrease our stress, even though I know sometimes that's challenging, as much as we can. And of course, please always remember, we must also hydrate. So diet plays a huge role, we believe, but it's not the only. I don't want you to forget all the other aspects as well. So thank you very much, and happy early Thanksgiving to everyone. And thank you for having me.
Thank you so much, Dr. Persaud. And I know Dr. Di Rocco is going to join us as well. So that was an amazing presentation. You covered so much. I learned a lot. I was feverishly taking notes. I know we only have a couple of minutes, so maybe we'll try to get to as many of these questions as we can. For any questions we aren't able to get to today, please know that you can call our Parkinson's Foundation toll-free helpline at 1-800-4PD-INFO. You can also talk to your healthcare provider. So I know that you talked a lot about protein and protein absorption. Is there, in terms of percentage of a person with Parkinson's diet, is there a percentage of your diet that should be protein, in your opinion?
So we don't have an exact number as far as I know, but based on the study, when they looked at the redistribution diet, it was about 0.8 grams of protein per kilogram of body weight. So that takes a little bit of calculation to figure out, but based on your body weight, it's about 0.8 grams of protein in the protein redistribution diet. I don't know if Dr. Di Rocco has a more exact ratio or anything like that.
No, I don't think that we really should be so precise. And I think
Right.
anything, my suggestion is that we sort of don't over focus on the exact numbers, but more on the general principles. And also there's something very empirical. So, there is in relationship, for instance, to interference with the medication. So, when people do change the diet and start feeling better, there is a natural way in which this is sort of understood. And the limits, that if you eat a little bit more of this piece of cheese or whatever, you may have more of time, or you avoid it. So there is a way in which you apply the general principle to life, and everybody has a different diet, has different needs, a different timing, and so my suggestion is not to focus exactly on the precise number, but more on the general concept.
That's great. And are either of you aware of a connection between celiac disease and developing Parkinson's, or Parkinson's and hyperactive eating? Or do you know of any connections there?
Dr. Persaud, shall I reply? And the answer is that this has been suggested in the past. And again, in my mind, is part of a broader context. So as we understand it, as Dr. Persaud very nicely outlined in the initial part of her talk, the reason why we are understanding how the intestine, the gut, is really the port of entry of good and bad. And of course, when there is an alteration for whatever other reasons, so this correlation has been done with other diseases of the intestine, like Crohn's disease and other sort of inflammatory disease. And it's not that surprising, if, as we understand that interaction, as a port of entry, if there is a sort of an intestine that is not already a problem on its own, then there may be sort of a way in which some of the toxins, some of the sort of compound, that the molecules that we discussed may have sort of a different way of entry than people who do not have celiac or Crohn's disease or other intestinal problems.
Mm-hmm. And I think it's all part of that chemical concept, which I agree with Dr. Rocco, is much more broad and much more complicated than what we can discuss today based on our research. But like I mentioned before, the gluten-free diet, which most patients with celiac would employ, that's essentially a diet where you avoid what your body's intolerant to, because you're trying to avoid this inflammatory response. So if we think about these diseases as inflammatory diseases, then yes, they all fall under the umbrella, Parkinson, celiac, Crohn's, etc., into this inflammatory category of diseases.
Great. So I think I know we're going to be over by a minute or so, but this question came in, just a couple of additional ones. For anyone that's not currently taking levodopa, do any of the recommended sort of protein, any recommendations around protein still apply? So if you're not taking medication, do you still have to sort of be mindful of your protein intake with Parkinson's?
Dr. Persaud?
So yes and no. Some proteins are shown to be better than others just because of the foods that are associated with them. So the ones that are higher in saturated fats, they also have a lot of protein, but we don't really recommend the saturated fats. Whereas, for example, like a fish like salmon has more polyunsaturated fats and the protein, and so with that protein and the fatty acids that are available, that's a more quote unquote beneficial protein to the overall inflammatory response. So yes, we focus on, how does it interact with the medications, but for patients who aren't on medications, this Mediterranean style of diet overall is still beneficial in terms of progression and onset of debility based on our most recent studies surrounding that diet. So the timing is not important when you're not on the medications, but the overall concept is still important.
That's great. Okay, and this will be our final question. How do I get involved in nutrition-based research?
Well, it depends on where you live, first of all. I mean, there are many ways to participate in research. Some can be done, even remotely. And certainly during the COVID epidemic, we have shifted a lot of our research engagement using computers and the web. There is a great place to start, which is clinicaltrials.gov. Which lists all the studies, all the research projects that are going on. And the second place, if you live by, usually is a major academic center. Not all the research is done through major academic centers, but there are usually posted and in the website, studies that are active or engaged. And I want to thank the person who asked this question, and maybe make this like a closing note and say that we are a community, and we work together in this, and certainly being part of an understanding and participating. Of course, we all have, challenges, personal and so on, but the sense of that, we're contributing to the whole understanding of the way in which, the community, we can all benefit from learning. So thank you for all of you who are considering joining research and clinical studies, because that's the way we understand. We had this lecture from this beautiful talk from Dr. Persaud, in which she detailed a lot of studies, and a lot of studies are done by looking at people who volunteer their time and beyond, in not just in this, not to help themselves, but to help this generation, the next generation of people who will be dealing with this disease.
All right. Well, thank you both again, Dr. Di Rocco, Dr. Persaud, for joining us today to share your knowledge and expertise, and especially to all of our attendees for your participation today. We appreciate your feedback. So as our program concludes, a window will open with a link to complete an evaluation. I hope you can take a moment to respond. We use these evaluations to improve and plan our future programs. A reminder that today's program has been recorded, and a link to the recording will be sent to you via email in the coming days, along with a link to complete a program evaluation if you aren't able to do so today. The Parkinson's Foundation provides weekly educational and wellness programs just like this one in a virtual format through our PD Health at Home series. We invite you to participate each week in our PD Health at Home events, including Mindfulness Mondays, Wellness Wednesdays, and Fitness Fridays. You can visit parkinson.org/pdhealth to learn about upcoming events and to register. In closing, the Parkinson's Foundation is here for you. Please visit our website at parkinson.org to learn about our expert care centers, research initiatives, or to download free educational resources. If you had a question today that was not answered, please do reach out to our toll-free helpline at 1-800-4PD-INFO or email helpline@parkinson.org. We thank you again for joining us, and we hope you have a wonderful week.